There are natural resources that are as vital for humanity as air, but perhaps there is no resource, except air itself, whose lack would create an insolvable problem for man in less than 1 minute. Air is necessary for the life of animals and plants. It is responsible for weather change, movement of sound waves, weathering of rock. Examples of this abound. The only conclusion we can arrive at is this: no life is possible on Earth without air or water. The pure atmospheric air surrounding the surface of the Earth has the following chemical composition: oxygen 21%, carbonic acid 0.003 to 0.004%, nitrogen 78%, and argon, helium, krypton and others at approximately 1%. Any change in the air composition is largely due to various emissions. Contributing to the global contamination are volcanic eruptions, desert dust storms and soil erosion. Industrial enterprises and transport are among the important pollution factors, as they collectively emit more than 1 billion solid and gaseous particles into the atmosphere every year. This gold deposit is located at Kumtor. Development of large-scale industrial production implies various positives and negatives. Non-government organisations have written a lot in the national press accusing the mine of producing dust that covers the nearby glaciers, reduces their reflective properties and speeds up melting. For this reason, the gold mine initiated exploration of the 3 largest glaciers located in the mine area to study their current state and industrial impacts upon them. The research programme was launched back in 1998 and included several components. The environmentalists were to identify the dust level in the air, the amount and depth of dust particles deposited on the glaciers, while the glaciologist's task was to determine changes in the outlines, surface and amount of the glaciers. The experiment lasted nearly 10 years, after which the experts compared their findings and unanimously concluded mining had virtually no effects on the glaciers themselves while melting. In fact, a process that actively began in the 1970s, this was a result of the glacier's natural pulsation and global climate change. It had nothing to do with mining. Nevertheless, close monitoring of dust levels at the mine site is still in progress. This object, somewhat resembling a metal beehive, is an advanced controller of dust level in the air. Another 6 similar beehives are installed in various points of the mine. For example, ours stands in front of a decline where exploration is in progress and hence dust may be produced. The environmental experts place a special cotton filter in a section of the hive so that dust particles deposit on the filter while air is pumped.
We install it for 24 hours, after which we remove it the next day to reweigh it in the incubator at our laboratory to see the difference.
After the weight difference has been identified, the experts, using mathematical formulas and considering some other factors like air temperature, pressure, etc., can easily find out the amount of dust in the air. In the past 12 years of research, it has never exceeded the maximum allowable level. The anthropogenic factor is presented, but it is not significant. Thus, the conclusion is substantiated by the result of years of studies. Having studied the composition of the dust, the scientists arrived at a very interesting conclusion. The dust is not of local origin, but comes largely from Central Asian deserts like the Taklamakan. Actually, dust storms bring hundreds of tons of surface dust particles to the Tian Shan every year. What deposits in the glaciers is also dust from arable land subject to erosion due to improper use of high-altitude pastures. Remember, when you're cleaning your own home, you may find all the types of dust existing on Earth, up to farina and dust particles of extraterrestrial origin.
Не только вот для этих ледников, но и для других ледников Тянь-Шаня характерно увеличение оседания пыли.
That's largely the effect of the anthropogenic factor producing dust from the pastures being eroded due to excessive grazing and reduced precipitation. This is not the case of these glaciers alone, but of all Tian Shan glaciers.
Поэтому в целом вот, ухудшение состояния ледников, оно вызвано человеческой деятельностью.
Even though the dust level at Kumtor remains within the maximum allowable range, the dust suppression programme is still relevant. Both in winter and in warm seasons, water solution is applied to the roads to the mine several times a day. Some sections of earth roads are normally covered with a special solution binding the dust particles together. The human organism is able to resist dust impact because the mucous coats of our respiratory tracts work as an effective air filter. But often when dust concentration exceeds the maximum allowable level, our organism may malfunction. Still worse, dust particles contain silicon because a dangerous disease, pulmonary silicosis. That's why air quality monitoring at Kumtor is not only a concern of environmentalists, but also that of labour safety experts. To understand what he inhales is a thing that any employee can easily do. For this purpose, he has to put on a small compressor. That's what is being done by a crusher operator. For accuracy in the experiment, an air intake tube is fixed at the mouth level. The compressor works on the same principle as a big air intake does, the one we saw outside. The dust level is also estimated based on the difference between the weight of a new filter and a worked filter. Research of this kind is carried out regularly, and the slightest deviation from the norm is regarded by the mine as an emergency. No work will be resumed at such a section until the dust factor is eliminated.
Датчики специально перед тем, как поставить данные насосы, они называются...
Before these pumps, called dust collectors, are installed, controllers are subject to calibration using a special device called Defender. The first result is recorded in a special log. After 8 hours of collecting dust, a repeat calibration with the Defenders occurs. The final readings are recorded in the same log and the results are compared. Then the average figure is taken, which is sent to specialized laboratories at Carabalta and in Canada.
И в Америку, да, специализированную лабораторию.
Unlike crusher operators, gold mill operators know pretty well what they are breathing. A 24-hour control over the concentration of hazardous reagents used for production purposes is done both automatically and by various experts, including environmentalists, chemists, and safety engineers.
In that event, the filter's color changes to wine red. In our case, we see no color changes in the filter.
Such indoor measurements are an obligatory operation to be done before people start working. At the moment, a safety engineer is measuring the amount of oxygen in a big container, and if Kanjarbek Urumov says OK, a group of welders will be allowed to get into the container.
It shows that the oxygen level is now 20.7%, while the standard level for oxygen is 20.9%.
People are duplicating the work of automation. For example, this device, barely visible against the background of a labyrinth of tubes, is a high-accuracy gas analyzer. Its electronic nose can detect the slightest change in the composition of the surrounding air. It's one of the devices used to monitor the entire production cycle. Gold is found at Kumtor in a finely disseminated form. In other words, you will not find nuggets here. Native gold with insignificant inclusions of some other chemical elements, and soil is the major form of the metal at Kumtor. That's why cyanide is used to extract gold molecules. This technology was developed long ago and is now common throughout the world.
It has a property of attracting gold and separating it from other admixtures. What we are dealing here with is primarily pyrite gold, a compound of iron, sulfur, and gold itself.
Cyanide is a salt of hydrocyanic acid. When inhaled, its highly concentrated vapours may prove lethal in a very short space of time. Therefore, the production process itself is arranged so as to preclude transformation of cyanide ions from liquid into gaseous state. This is the concern of chemical engineers who monitor the acid and alkali proportion, the very same pH balance of which we know from various commercials.
Normally, we take a very high value for pH. It is, as I said, between 10.5 and 11. This is done purposely in order to keep cyanide in a solute state and prevent its passing into a gaseous state.
The same pH control is performed at the effluent treatment plant. That's why the device recording the slightest presence of hydrocyanic acid vapours in the air shows 0. Dissolved cyanides will not get vaporized.
У самого рудника существует система контроля. Это
The mine has a control and test system of its own.
забора проб.
As for the tailings, true, there have been talks of other components contained in the tailings that can be produced profitably later on. These include various rare earth metals and a great deal of other compounds and elements. Of course, the tailings can be viewed as a kind of secondary, already treated ore, which can be employed subsequently to gain profit. But as regards the environmental risks, both the dam and the tailings management facility as such are quite safe.
Можно рассматривать как вот такую вторичную руду, уже достаточно так как бы обогащенную, и ее можно в дальнейшем использовать для того, чтобы получать, ну, как бы дополнительную прибыль. Но вот экологическую опасность сама по себе вот дамба, сами по себе вот этих само по себе хвостохранилища, они не представляют.
Wild ducks that sometimes come flying to the Kumtor mine site prefer taking a rest in the tailings pond that contains settled water. This water is much warmer than air, and the birds warm themselves there, a fact regarded by the environmentalists as another proof of the waste's safety. Animal organisms, after all, are the best and most accurate gauge. In 1996, the mine launched a radiation monitoring program. The radiation background is measured at 12 points once per week. The average radiation level here is 17 microrontgens per hour, approximately the same as in Bishkek and lower than the average value for Kyrgyzstan.
We are young and we have children. Everything is quite all right. You've seen yourselves that we measured radiation even over a bucket of fresh slurry, haven't you?
И что касается вот разговоров о том, что там, значит, высокая радиоактивность вообще на Кумторе, и то, что там...
The allegations that the Kumtor area is highly radioactive and that the mine produces uranium from this ore, not gold, are pure fiction. Measurements show clearly that the background radioactive radiation at Kumtor is even lower than the average one across Kyrgyzstan.
Показали, что фоновое радиоактивное излучение на территории Кумтора ниже даже, чем в среднем по республике.
The Kumtor company's corporate policy is based on the idea that every human being should have the soul of an environmentalist. In other words, you should understand that no modern living style is possible without consideration for the environment or efforts to rebuild the harmony between man and nature. Air is the most mysterious of the four elements. It is ever-changeable and unstable, just as the mirages that it produces. Like water, this element is capable of transmitting information, emotions, and even thoughts to long distances. Air is sound. Air is oxygen. With each breath, we inhale air that might have visited the remotest parts of the globe, from the waterless Sahara to the rainforests of the Amazon. Whatever, 1 out of 4 people in the world today breathes in air that is dangerous to health. You can address this problem using 2 methods. Either you eschew industry and return to the Middle Ages, or, more realistically, you follow strictly the existing safety and environmental standards.